From the Times and the Sunday Times, this is The Story. I'm Manveen Rana. About an hour's drive from Salt Lake City, in the mountainous state of Utah, one of our reporters in America, on her way to her next interview, found herself driving out to a farm.
It was down a long track, and it sort of perched between these grass meadows, which are just so lush and beautiful in the summer. And then up behind it go the mountains, which are more arid.
In the meadows below, there are cows grazing, whilst pigs and horses roam higher up.
And so their farmhouse was down a very long track, and it's sort of white clapboards, and you kind of look out the kitchen window, and it's honestly like a screensaver. It's like kind of overwhelmingly beautiful. You can't believe that you can wake up and look at that every morning.
Hello, good morning.
Hi, how are you?
Daniel.
Nice to meet you. So good to meet you,
Nice
Megan.
to meet you as well, Megan. I'm good.
Megan Agnew was there to meet Hannah Neeleman, a 34-year-old wife, mother of 8, and influencer extraordinaire, known by her brand, Ballerina Farm.
She's got 9 million followers on Instagram. She's got 7.4 million followers on TikTok.
God.
And she's got 1.5 million followers on YouTube.
But she's been labelled one of the queens of a new social media movement, the tradwives.
If you are not familiar with the term tradwife, it is a woman who chooses to live a more traditional life with ultra-traditional gender roles.
Tradwives tend to look like models and live like 1950s housewives. They often dress glamorously in full makeup just to spend the day in the kitchen cooking. They whisper recipes as if they've never had to raise their voices, despite the clutch of kids in the background. And they cook everything, and I mean everything, from scratch.
My sister's in town to visit, and she's been craving bubblegum so bad, but she ran out, so I just decided to make it for her.
Yup, including bubblegum, with fresh, organic ingredients. So, what's behind this craze? And what does it tell us about modern feminism? The story today, tradwives, the influencers selling 1950s housewife life.
I'm Megan Agnew. I'm a senior features writer based in the US.
Megan, you've recently been to Utah, to a place that's actually called Ballerina Farm, to meet Hannah Neeleman and her family. For the uninitiated, and I have to confess, up until a few days ago, I was one of them, who exactly is she?
Well, Manveen, I have to say, if you've looked at her on Instagram now, or any other social media platform, I'm afraid that your algorithm has now been hacked.
I'm done
for. You'll be
for.
slowly radicalised. You're going to be learning how to drain things through muslins and make toothpaste from scratch, because Hannah Neeleman is part of this online phenomenon, and they've come to be called the trad wives. They kind of have chosen this life for themselves where they are fulfilling really stereotypical historical gender norms. So they don't work outside the home, though they are obviously now social media influencers. They tend to have lots of children. They make meals totally from scratch. And they crucially, are very public about it. So these are not women who are choosing this life and then living this life behind closed doors. They're posting about it online. And this content is glowing and gorgeous and looks totally idyllic and tranquil. And you kind of look at it and like, I'm looking out the window into Midtown in New York and it's really stuffy here and busy and dirty. And you look at these pages and you think like, oh God, doesn't that look like heaven? Everything's working, everything's right. That's maybe how it's supposed to be.
Well, I mean, that's part of the appeal, I guess. But take me back to a moment in January where Hannah Neeleman, this 34-year-old who lives on a very idyllic farm but has a lifestyle that reflects that, suddenly ends up in the glare of publicity on stage. What was going on?
So she had won Mrs. American in August, which is a pageant for people who are married. And so she qualified to go through to Mrs. World, essentially. And at the same time as she qualified, she became pregnant for the 8th time. So when the final of the pageant rolled around in January, she had just had a baby.
Okay, day 2 of postpartum pageant prep is happening. My friend that does spray tanning and teeth whitening is coming up. She's coming all the way up to the farm so she can get me prepped for tomorrow because we leave tomorrow.
So she appeared on stage in her ball gown and spray tanned and her hair done, and she was 12 days postpartum.
Oh, wow.
I know.
I mean, most people would barely be standing. How did she go from giving birth to standing up in a swimsuit on stage to answer questions?
She said that she laid low for some days. And then after which she kind of looked at her husband and said, I don't think that I can do this.
5 days after I had the baby, I looked at Daniel and I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to go in a week. Like, this is a lot. Like, I was bleeding and swollen and milk was coming in.
Then slowly she began to get up and she started doing sort of ballet exercises in the bathroom. And she had been preparing, she said, she'd been having ice baths in their irrigation ditches on their land and like weightlifting and...
Oh my God.
I know, and the irony is that it was like this Herculean effort, this like really brutal, hardcore effort to basically look totally perfectly composed and pretty. And like she hadn't really made very much effort at all. And I guess that's kind of what being a trad wife and for many years being a woman was about, was that you had to look a certain way, but you also had to make it look like it was completely effortless.
And so, yeah. I like laid so low for the first week and a half. Like, I didn't leave the house. I just like tried to heal and rest as much as I could. And then I felt like, okay, I can do this. Mm-hmm. So we went. And then, I went crazy on social media.
What was the reaction like online after she did this pageant?
Everyone was kind of spinning in circles, not really knowing what to do with it, because in many ways she had decided to do it herself and that was her choice. And if we go by choice feminism, whereby women are free to do what they want and that in itself is a feminist act, then sure, she should be entitled to do that. There was a whole other group of people who were saying it was deeply, deeply dangerous for other women, for her to be up there doing that it was putting unnecessary pressure on new mothers, that we were going back to this era where women had to lose weight immediately and feel like they had to be presentable and sort of have this perfect face plastered on, and weren't we beyond this? And then there were people raging at her for that. I mean, it really, really struck a deep chord in people, and mostly in women.
I suppose it sort of like just highlights the tensions between female empowerment, of feeling like you can do anything, even when you've just had your 8th baby, and at the same time setting up an unrealistic ideal for so many people, where again, despite all the work that goes into it behind the scenes, it looks effortless.
It's exactly that.
So I really try to stay out of it.
It doesn't impact you.
No, I mean, it does, right? It does. I hear things, and there'll be people that'll be like, wow, I saw this article, like friends that will text things, and I'm like, I wish you wouldn't have said that. But yeah, we try to just stay out of it.
Well, Megan, given that, why do you think this whole fashion for trad wives, traditional wives, how has this come about? Is this sort of like a post-feminist movement? What's happened to make trad wives such a movement right now?
I sort of looked back or started at the girl boss era of feminism, which was sort of the fourth wave in about 2013, when it became really central in pop culture. And the way that feminism was spoken about then was often associated with corporate culture and work, and that you had to lean in. And Sheryl Sandberg of Facebook was the sort of face of it all. And you just had to be hardcore and do it all, and you could have it all.
Sheryl Sandberg is one of the most powerful women in the world. At 43, she's the chief operating officer of Facebook and a billionaire. And you could say she's lonely at the top.
Women have been 14% of the top jobs in corporate America for 10 years. 10 years of no progress. I'm not telling women to act more like a man. I am telling women that we need to believe in ourselves.
Then, in the years since, we've sort of seen that as being quite faddy and quite associated with making money.
Quite difficult to carry off.
Totally. And there just aren't the systems in place to allow it. Certainly in the UK and certainly in the US, there just isn't the infrastructure or the capability in place to enable women yet and their husbands to both work full-time jobs and have children who are looked after around the clock without spending a fortune on childcare.
So this is now the backlash, effectively.
I also think another element of it, which I spoke to a number of my colleagues actually at the Sunday Times who have kids about this, is that over the last 5 years, 10 years or so, there's been this real purging in the way that we talk about motherhood, in that women have been sort of feeling released and able to say that actually it's really boring, it's really messy, they hated mat leave, they were really alone, work is released for them, etc., etc. And what actually that has done is made it harder for women to celebrate and talk about the times in parenthood that they love, and they feel like they're being smug at not being able to talk about that. And so they said that they watch it and enjoy it because it kind of allows them to indulge in that side of things, which is really important and lovely too, because these women do talk about how brilliant motherhood is, and there is a smaller space left for that, I think.
I'm slowly getting kicked out of the kitchen. The kids are cooking more and more lately. Today they wanted to make pizza, so they first started by making mozzarella. They got 2 gallons of raw milk.
And does it come at a particular moment for America where actually a lot of the country is leaning into, you know, a sort of a Christian conservative version of American values? It sort of almost reflects the politics.
Yeah. And I think there are, among the wider context of falling birth rates too in America, there's an anxiety around it. There really is. And there's an anxiety around people governing their own body autonomy. You know, this is also linked to, in some distant way, but definitely as part of the wider view on it, the debate around abortion and contraception and IVF and having lots of children in a natural way with your heterosexual husband or wife under the eyes of God is seen as being the way that you should have a family in the US by large groups of people.
So, Megan, you were telling us about sort of the new American ideal of what a family is, which you got an insight to when you went to see the Neelemans. You told us a bit about Hannah Who is she? How old is she? Just describe her for us.
She's 34. She's got 8 children. She grew up in Utah, quite nearby, in a sort of lower middle class Mormon family. She was one of 9. And she was homeschooled and sort of was immediately attracted towards ballet and was incredibly talented. And so as the years went on, she qualified to study at Juilliard, which is the sort of best performing arts college in the whole of the States. It's in New York.
That's incredibly impressive.
And then she met her husband, Daniel, who was also a Mormon and also came from a family of 9.
Tell us a bit about him. What's his story?
Daniel's from a much wealthier family. His father founded JetBlue Airlines, among some others. They grew up in Connecticut, and his father commuted into New York every day. They had a wealthy suburban upbringing, but he did not have a single animal growing up. This was like mowed lawns and commuter belt Connecticut. This was not the wilds of the American West that he then went to pursue. But he really dreamt of this extreme life as a small, pioneering American farmer, wearing a cowboy hat and denims.
Almost like a frontier family.
They call themselves a frontier family, yeah.
And how do they end up getting married? How do they meet, and how quickly does all of that happen?
So they met when Daniel was 23 and Hannah's 21, and Hannah's still going into her final year at Juilliard. And they met at a basketball game, and Daniel said that he saw her and just thought, yeah, she's going to be my wife.
Oh yeah, I saw her and I was ready to go. I was like, okay.
He was like,
sign me up.
He called me the next day, like, let's go out.
Let's go out. And I was thinking, like, let's get married. You know, that's what I was thinking. And but she wouldn't go on a date with me for 6 months.
Until finally she mentioned to him in passing that she was flying back from Utah, which was where he was at college, to New York, which was where she was at college. And he said, do you know what? That's so funny. I'm on the same flight as you. And so they went to the airport together and they went to the check-in desk and they were on seats next door to each other. And Hannah just thought it was the weirdest thing she didn't understand. And then she found out that his dad owned the airline and that he'd made a call and made it happen. And so they sat next to each other and that was their first date. Were you ready to get married as quickly as Daniel was?
No. In fact, I was kind of like, maybe we should just date a year, you know, and I finished school and whatever. And Daniel was like, it's not going to work, you know, like, we got to get married now.
And so we dated for a month, we got engaged, and we were married a month later.
Two months after that, she was pregnant with their first child. And so she was doing her final year at Juilliard pregnant. She was apparently the first Juilliard student in modern history to be pregnant with a baby.
Was she able to carry on dancing?
She did for a little while.
Yeah, I mean, I danced in Brazil for 2 years, I guess professionally, after my first and second. And that was hard. Like, you give up a piece of yourself, you know? But I don't think I would change it.
No.
And Daniel was like, if you want to dance, you know, like, go dance, you know? Like, you know, we were open to anything, but I knew deep down that I wanted to raise my babies, you know? So.
She said that it was very difficult, that you just have to fully commit yourself to dance. So she gave it up. There's still some heartbreak there for her when we spoke about that. You know, she misses it. And she was going to build a ballet studio actually at the farm. And then it was made into the children's schoolroom, I guess. They're all homeschooled. So that's what happened to that. But yeah, she said it was a great sacrifice, and she acknowledges that her life today is built on great sacrifices, one of which was her relationship with dance?
Well, you know, I gave up dance, which was like a big sacrifice for me. Daniel gave up, you know, his career ambitions, and we were like, okay, let's start something together. Like, those were big sacrifices for us.
Has Daniel made as many sacrifices?
Well, I don't think so. You know, he was the one who dreamt of farming, and he was the one who dreamt of the big mountains of the American West. And he wanted a wife who stayed at home and looked after the children. And there was a point that we were standing on the side of the mountain, basically, next to these pigs and chickens. And it's so vast and it's intimidatingly rural and it's awe-inspiring, but there's kind of something frightening about how in the middle of nowhere you are. And I asked her whether this was what she always wanted. Did you want to have a life this rurally when you were a kid and when you were a teenager?
No.
It's not what you imagined?
No. I mean, I was like, my goal was New York City, you know?
Wow.
Like, I left at 17, and I was, like, so excited to get to New York. And, you know, I traveled a lot, and I just loved that, you know, energy. But then
Where you were going to be a ballerina, that's what you sort of dreamt of?
Yeah.
She wanted to be a professional dancer. And then Daniel came over and, you know, I asked him, like, was this what you always dreamt of? Did you dream of this? Is this what you wanted?
Yes, but you know, the dreams, when you don't have it around you, I don't have any friends or relatives or anyone in this line of work. It took me until I was, you know, in my late 20s to, like, be able to identify, like, okay,
That's it.
I need to do this and no one's going to help me do it. I'm going to have to do this by myself.
And he was like, yeah, this is what I always wanted. This is what I had in mind. And so that's when I really realized that he was kind of the leader of this dream. And she seemingly loves her life there. So I'm not saying that she was kind of tricked or coerced into going at all. But this is what he wanted. And what she wanted was something very different initially.
Daniel and I are a partnership now, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I don't feel like I'm at home raising kids by myself. Like, that's hard.
Yeah.
You know? And women need support. And so when Daniel was like, okay, let's build something together, we really carried the mantle together.
So this is the sort of place that they've arrived at, I suppose. Hannah doesn't see herself as a trad wife. She sees herself as being a working mother, basically, which is working online.
We're just still doing what we're doing. We don't like hashtag trad wife. We can't help it. Like, this is what we are. If we're a trad dad, trad wife, like, so be it. We're kind of on our own path.
Mm-hmm. And I also don't necessarily identify with, because I don't feel like, I mean, we are traditional in the sense that it's like a man and a woman, you know, where we have children. But I do feel like we're paving a lot of paths that haven't been paved before, you know?
The strange thing, as we said, that will always be the case is that online it looks like she's not working. You know, her whole identity online is about motherhood and working the farm. But that's not her job at all. Her job is uploading the content about motherhood and working on the farm.
I mean, I don't know how she has the time. It seems she does everything from scratch. It can take days just to make a cheese toastie.
I know. She says that she does it every night after the kids go to bed. So she goes to sleep at about 1, 2 in the morning. She's up at about 6, 5:30, 6. She goes to the gym and then she does it all again. But Daniel mentioned to me in passing, you know, sometimes she gets so exhausted that she can't get out of bed for a week. You know, she gets so ill. Because having 8 children is just chaos. You know, I spent 4 hours with them. And by the end of it, I was like, my brain was clanging. And she was just like completely calm about the whole thing. I will say, just kind of phenomenal to be that way. And as was he, I have to say, he was also like super involved with all the kids.
I mean, in a way, it's reassuring to know that the image you get online is kind of real. There aren't sort of nannies in the background being pulled out. Do you worry that what they're putting out on social media and what a lot of these tradwives are putting out is this sort of unachievable image of this simple life, which, normal people wouldn't be able to pull off at all? Is this as unachievable as the Sheryl Sandberg lean in, I can rule the world while having a family? I mean, neither sounds like it's really doable.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And, she said to me, I really want to show other women that it's possible, but it's not possible. Like, it's not possible to live this life because not everyone can be a social media star. This life is for social media and financially enabled by social media. If they didn't have all those millions of followers, she wouldn't be doing this exact thing day to day. Or maybe she would, but it would be enabled by his family wealth because his father is a billionaire. And it's also dangerous for some people. There's a reason why women fought so hard to get out of the kitchen and to get out of the domestic sphere and to stop looking after kids, because the structure of it can lead to this real power imbalance and has done for many decades. So it's really hard. We get ourselves in such a tangle because we kind of move forward and then we maybe don't look back enough. I think it looks very beautiful. And I think we should be very wary about things that look very beautiful. And I think we've been missold this before. This isn't the first time that women have been sold this like really happy, content version of home life. And it hasn't been true. So I think it's glorious in many ways. I think it's great that she is celebrating motherhood and enabling other people to. And also she thinks that she's just documenting her own life. But yeah, it's not real.
How did you feel about the whole tradwife movement by the time you left? I mean, both of us will have spent most of our lives thinking about different forms of feminism, what it means for us. What did you think of the tradwife version of feminism?
I kind of I do feel very distrustful of it. I also just felt, oh my gosh, my life is so extraordinarily different. To be very earnest about the whole thing, how lucky I was to be able to make a choice that my grandmother and her mother and etc. weren't able to make for themselves, which is I don't have to marry and I don't have to have children and I can live in New York and have my own salary. I kind of came away feeling quite grateful, but I also came away feeling like my life was like slovenly and and like sinful and terrible in comparison. My late nights after work on a Friday in the West Village, I was like, oh God. But I just thought, how lucky are we that both things can exist at once in the same world.
That was Megan Agnew, senior features writer at the Sunday Times, based in the US. You can read Megan's full profile for the Sunday Times magazine at thetimes.com with a subscription. The producer today was Sam Chantarasak. The executive producer was Kate Ford. And sound design and theme composition were by Mal Lassetto. Make sure you follow us to get every episode dropping directly in your feed. And if you can, please do leave us a review. It'll help others to find us. Thanks for listening. See you tomorrow.